it really helped a lot to let me try to do more things, um, as opposed to just staying home or hiding out.
It sounds like this is sort of how he discovered himself. He's talking about being subdued and being an introvert, and then found this community and really like blossomed as an individual. And this is like it's such a rich interview and honestly pretty emotional. It just goes to show like the power of this event. It is
hmm
extremely powerful. It's magical for sure.
Welcome to Something More Human. I'm Sam.
And I'm Elliot.
Post-pandemic, it feels as though our social skills have atrophied.
It feels like the barrier to entry to meeting new people and cultivating community is higher than ever before, but we believe that meaningful relationships are the key to a fulfilling life.
So, we're ditching the surface level conversations to ask and answer questions all about human connection. Join us in creating something more human. Of all of our episodes, we highly recommend that you watch this one on YouTube. We had the opportunity to join the 2024 Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta as media this year, and it was truly an incredible experience. Elliot and I have been for probably 25 years, but this was a very special year. So you'll see footage of the fiesta and you'll see footage of our interviewees. So it'll still be great if you listen, but if you have a chance to sit down and watch, we highly recommend it.
If you know Sam, this is probably Sam's favorite thing on earth. It's 10 days every single year, and Sam wants to go to every single day, every single time for the 7 years that I've known her. And we've gotten pretty close. This year we went almost every day, besides for the first couple days that I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
You love this quite a bit. I think there's plenty of reasons why, and we'll definitely get into those.
I think there are Disney adults and then there's Balloon Fiesta Disney adults, maybe some version of that. That's absolutely me. Even if you're not from New Mexico, even if you have no idea what the Balloon Fiesta is, this is an event that I cannot overstate how much I recommend it. It's my favorite thing, and it is truly magic on earth. It's really affordable, it's really accessible, and it cannot be beat.
hmm
If you want to plan to go to 2025 or beyond, you should probably start planning it now. Send us a DM. We'll help you with your itinerary. We have some Airbnb recommendations or hotel recommendations, areas of towns that we love, and businesses that we love. So we're really excited that this episode is in partnership with Puzzled. They're in Old Town Albuquerque and one of the absolute best places to shop for yourself, shop for your friends, shop for your family, and we'll talk more about them later. So the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta is the world's largest hot air balloon festival. The next one of comparable size is the one in Cappadocia, Turkey. So, unless you plan to travel internationally, which I also recommend, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and you can go every single year if you really want to.
hmm
So, a little bit about Balloon Fiesta before we dive in. I mentioned that it is the largest hot air balloon festival in the world. It started out as 13 balloons in 1972 in the parking lot of a mall in Albuquerque. And
Corn- Coronado
in
Mall.
Coronado Mall, yes. It has since grown into approximately 600 balloons and about 700 pilots. This year, there were 551 total balloons, 667 pilots, 16 countries, and 45 states. The average number of estimated guest visits is 838,000.
Which is pretty much like the population of Albuquerque, honestly.
This is a massive event.
Yeah. So you're probably wondering, okay, we've been listening to this show. This show is about human connection. Why are you guys talking about the Balloon Fiesta? And we'll definitely get into that. And I think that we can start with the personal connection between you and I. It's pretty fascinating to me that you and I have very similar stories of our first memories of Balloon Fiesta.
hmm
My first memory was at probably 1995. I was about 4 years old, and I was all bundled up and sitting, I think maybe in a car seat, and my mom handed me a buttered, toasted, frosted wild berry Pop Tart, and I remember the Pop Tart vividly. And we were getting ready to go to the Bloom Fiesta at probably 3:30 or 4 in the morning, and that is how early you have to get up to get to the Bloom Fiesta to avoid traffic. And 50,000 people do it every single day for 10 days, and your memory is quite similar. And you're probably about, do you think about the same age, 4 or 5?
Yeah, I think this is like early 2000s. I'm maybe Well, I don't know how old you are when you're in a stroller, but I'm in a stroller. We're on the field. For those of you that don't know, there's two events. There is a morning event and an evening event. The morning event happens basically at dawn. So the sun has yet to come up. I'm sitting in a stroller with purple mittens on, eating a Krispy Kreme donut, just destroying my mittens with stickiness. And I'm having the worst time because I am frozen solid, waiting for the sun to go up, waiting for the balloons to take off.
One of the things that makes Albuquerque so special and maybe sometimes dicey in certain situations is that 6 degrees of separation just quite frankly does not exist. It's more like 2 degrees of separation. And with that being said, you're more than likely to know someone that owns a balloon or that flies a balloon or that
Cruise.
has crewed,
Mm-hmm.
is about to this year, or has even taken a ride on like the commercial Rainbow Riders.
Mm-hmm.
It's just part of your identity as a New Mexican living in Albuquerque.
And these interviews reflect that. So, in some way, shape, or form, Elliot and I know these interviewees or know someone who knows them. And their age range is quite vast. So, I think the average age of our interviewees is maybe like 60. We have people as young as probably early 40s, as old as 88. So, even though our memories are us as children when Balloon Fiesta had already started and was already at the field that it is now, a lot of these early memories are from the very, very first Balloon Fiesta or really early on in the mid 70s when it was still young.
For these folks who are probably unlike us when we were 3 or 4, when the Balloon Fiesta was already around, they're probably in their teens,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So quite a different perspective, pretty unique, and probably my favorite part about these interviews.
Mm-hmm. So the first person we want to introduce you to is Steve Stucker. He is most well known for being the weatherman in Albuquerque. He had a 48-year radio and TV career and spent a lot of time covering Balloon Fiesta. He has honestly become kind of a face of Fiesta. He's really humble about it, but he has this getup that you'll see and that we'll talk about that's incredibly iconic. People literally wait in line to get their picture taken with him. And his coverage and his kind of face in relationship to Balloon Fiesta has become one that people recognize.
That connection, I think this is the only interviewer that I know, or that knows someone that I know.
This
Right?
is your connection.
Right, this is my connection.
Mhm.
My parents go to the same church that he does,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, Steve Stucker is like one of the faces. Like you said, he's very humble. He would not admit to that, but he is absolutely one of the faces of the Balloon Fiesta. And I was like, we need to find a way to interview him. And then remembered that my parents know him quite well,
Mm-hmm.
and so we met up with him, and he was very busy before and after. Countless people coming up to him trying to take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch the footage, there's people like behind him, behind the camera waving. He's just a figure, and he's a great guy with a pretty unique getup too. So
Well, I started in broadcasting as a radio guy. I was a disc jockey and a program manager, and moved out here to New Mexico in 1983. And the next fall, somebody said, well, we're going to go down to Balloon Fiesta. And they woke me up in the middle of the night and drugged me down to Albuquerque. And oh my gosh, I was cold and I was tired. And back in those days, I was most likely hungover because I lived a very different lifestyle back then. And I don't remember that much about it except that there were these people running around in these crazy hats, and they reminded me of the old Flintstones cartoon. They had a character called Kazoo that used to fly around Fred and Barney's head. And years later, somebody invited me to come down as a volunteer to Balloon Fiesta. And I hadn't had that positive of an experience the first time, but I came down, spent a week in the volunteer tent, saw the behind the scenes operations, and met a bunch of the pilots, made friends with the volunteers, and I loved it. The year after that, I started at KOB Television, and they had been doing weekend broadcasts, and I said, why don't you let me go down during the week and do something live? And they gave it a try. And give me a week, and 35 years later, we're still out here doing it. So it's just been a great experience for me.
I think what's so special about how an icon like Steve Stucker became was he literally just got invited by a friend to come down to Balloon Fiesta, and the next year got invited by a volunteer to join the volunteer team. 35 years later, he's an inductee of the Hall of Fame. That's a huge accomplishment. And we often talk on the show about one person can open a door, or one person can make an introduction, or one person can make you feel less alone. This is a perfect example of one invitation from a friend completely changed the trajectory of his career.
Completely changed the trajectory of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. Yeah, we keep talking about the butterfly effect and like the nucleus or the Big Bang, but like it's absolutely undeniably sick to think about that. To think that he was drunk and hungover
Mm-hmm.
and decided to go with his friends down to Albuquerque, and it changed his life.
So in 2023, you were inducted into the Balloon Fiesta Hall of Fame. What did that mean for you? What was that like?
Well, you know, it makes me laugh, it makes me giggle, and it brings tears to my eyes. I mean, I love this place, I really do. And I went 33 years and never missed a single of the 9 days out here. And when I retired from television a year and a half ago, had to decide if I was still going to do Balloon Fiesta or not. Old man, struggling with a couple of health issues, nothing horrible, but it's just hard on the body to be out here that much. And I've done 4 days each year, last year and this year. But getting inducted into the Hall of Fame last year was total surprise. I didn't know it was coming. My friend, the late Scott Appleman, who just passed away a month or so ago unexpectedly, he was such a key part of the growth of Balloon Fiesta, the founder of Rainbow Riders, world's largest hot air ballooning company. Scott and I became friends, and last year he just showed up on the last Saturday and said, "Hey, 11:30, you got to be down at the Cutter Pavilion for a luncheon." I said, "Well, I wasn't invited to anything." "Oh, you got to be there." And I showed up and I was inducted. So totally surprised. I got the nice plaque. I got the pictures, and you know, it means a lot to me because most of the people that are in there are people like Scott or like Maxie Anderson or Sid Cutter, the Abruzos, who really were the pillars of the ballooning community. Most of them are pilots or big time operators. And I'm just, you know, just a little guy who just got invited by a friend to come volunteer and had fun. And fortunately got the good idea to come out and broadcast, and then kind of stumbled across the hat and coat idea by accident, and everything just took off from there.
Where did we come up with the question that we asked everybody but Steve, which is the Balloon Fiesta an addiction?
I don't remember exactly how we came up with it, but I remember that I sort of every single time I talk about Balloon Fiesta, I say it's like Disneyland. It has that wonder. It never gets old. Like I have been every year for as long as I can remember for my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it and I look forward to it every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So it never loses that spark and that magic.
Mm-hmm.
So I originally wanted to ask everybody, does it ever get old? And I think that question transformed into what is it that keeps people coming back year after year, day after day, balloon ride after balloon ride for 50 plus years.
33 years of not missing an event is the definition, in my opinion, of an addiction. And obviously a healthy one at that, you know?
He also mentioned that he's been retired for the last 2 years, yet he's come back to do 4 days of coverage, I think 4 of the 9 days. So that's almost half. That's still quite a commitment.
Yeah, he's super committed. The Get Up weighs 25 pounds. He is facing a little bit of health issues. He's getting a little bit older, but he's clearly dedicated. And so I think that translates into addiction. I know that's a heavy word, but it's definitely a theme of this episode, and it's quite remarkable to see the vastness and the variety of answers that we get. So
we talk a lot about like phone addiction and how we're wasting our time or wasting our lives, and we want to be more connected. But this is kind of a fun, positive, sunshiny way to talk about quote unquote addiction or following something that brings you joy. So one of my very, very best friends, she is the connector here for 2 of our next interviewees. One is Judy. Judy's pretty amazing. She's really, really humble. So she doesn't mention it in the interview, but she's one of the first ever female pilots for ballooning. So she really originated with Balloon Fiesta almost. I think she became a pilot in like 73, 74, something like that. She is the godmother of my very best friend. And you'll also meet Wally, who is her dad. And Wally kind of reminds me of my dad. So he feels a little bit like a second dad. And we really get into his experience and his kind of perception of this idea of addiction.
Do you consider ballooning an addiction?
It could be for some people. I think that there's a real power thing, and I'm the star,
Sure.
for pilots, and giving away cards and giving away their pins and everything. I think that is probably more addictive than the flying.
I realized that for me, it's not really like the power and ego is not really a bad thing here, in my opinion, because what I'm realizing after watching these interviews is that I guess it becomes, negative or a bad thing if people are taking advantage of other people with that ego, and the power. But I think the reason that she's saying that is because it's clear to me that all of these people found somewhere that they were valued and found somewhere that they were cared about and loved, and they went all in on that community and those relationships. And I think when that happens and you are sort of like a star of the show at the world's largest festival where there's 900,000 people coming in 10 days, and you can come up right up to the balloon and you're handing out pins and signing cards. Of course, there's a little bit of pride and ego there, right? But to me, that's human nature. And so I wanted to take a positive spin on this. And this whole episode is really a feel-good episode. But even this part, I think that's really what it's about. I think that people just found their place and went all in.
I think it's also back to this idea that we all want to be seen in some way and we all want to feel heard in this world. So I actually asked Judy, if you hadn't have had a group of women interested in getting their pilot's license back in the 70s, do you think that you would have done it? And she said probably not.
Do you think if you didn't have those first female pilots back in the 70s to become a pilot alongside, you would have gotten into piloting?
Probably not, because it was fun. It was fun to do it in a group. People who had been flying longer than us were taking turns giving us lessons, so we got to be involved with a lot of different kinds of pilots and things like that. And Sid gave me my check ride and everything.
Having a community, having someone to share this experience with is really novel. And what's not novel, that was a fun theme that came out of these interviews, was kind of resonating with the way that I describe Balloon Fiesta. It's like Disney World. I feel like I'm in a Wizard of Oz movie. The magic never fades. And Wally really brought up the idea that it's like being a kid again.
I forgot where I heard it. I know it's a book. It might even be, I think the book is called How to Tell a Story. But the author says, you don't determine meaning before you make the art. The art determines the meaning for you. And in this case, that is certainly truer than ever before for this episode. I think it's at this point in putting the episode together that I began to realize what this episode was really about.
So was it just the love story of you going up in that first flight, absolutely loving it, that inspired you to get your pilot's license?
I think that everybody has an urge to fly at some point. And flying dreams are the most fantastic dreams I had when I was a kid, because I could escape all this stuff on the ground, and I would fall, and just before I hit the ground, I'd flap my arms really hard and I would fly back up again. And it was literally a dream. And then I'd wake up from that dream feeling refreshed and happy, and ballooning came as close to that dream as I could imagine. So that's how it got in my blood, so to speak.
I kind of want to hone in on like language. Language is so powerful. He's choosing to use, of all words in the English language, he's choosing to use words like, I could escape all the stuff on the ground. And like, as much as life is about living, it's also about escaping. And for
Mm.
Wally, it clearly was.
I think one of the benefits of kind of practicing escapism, whether it's daydreaming, flying in a balloon, having actual dreams while you sleep, is sort of, I don't know, there's a piece of self-discovery for me around what are my desires? What are the things that I want out of life? What are the outlandish things that maybe my conscious mind wouldn't come up with?
Hmm.
He talks a lot about flying, but when you start to do these kinds of activities with people around you and you start to build a community where you're seeing and being seen by other physical, real people, I think it gives you an opportunity to grow into a new person or grow into the person that you are dreaming about.
I think I was pretty much subdued and in my shell, so to speak, until I got involved with these people who were doing this stuff that I loved doing, and I could be a part of it, and it got me out of my shell. And I'm not an extrovert by any means, but at times I could be, and so it really helped a lot to let me try to do more things, as opposed to just staying home or hiding out.
This is what I mean when I talk about like the power and ego. I'm sure that there's a certain amount of pride, that Wally takes in his identity as a balloonist. Like
Mhm.
this is sort of how it sounds like this is sort of how he discovered himself. He's talking about being subdued and being an introvert and then found this community and really like blossomed as an individual. And this is like, it's such a rich interview and honestly pretty emotional. And um, it just goes to show like the power of this event. It is
Mhm.
extremely powerful. It's magical for sure.
Is that what you think is kind of what makes it so successful and what makes people so excited about it? Is this kind of whimsical, dream-like flying in a balloon feels like being a part of a Wizard of Oz movie?
Well, we've been fortunate here, and we have a really good relationship with the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. Most air shows, you can't let the people come up close to the balloon. But these shows, people can come right up, and if they can get close enough, they can ask the pilot a question, and the pilot answers as best he can, or he says, I'm busy right now, or sometimes he says, well, if you want to know more, why don't you come hang out with my crew, and if you help me, maybe you'll get a ride.
I think this piece of being able to see the pilot and maybe talk to the pilot and talk to their crew and get a trading card is another piece that makes this feel so special.
Hmm.
Of course, the Wizard of Oz part comes because of the actual hot air balloon, but I also think it's like making eye contact with the people in the gondola, which is the basket, waving at them when they take off.
Hmm.
And a lot of crewing, I think actually all crewing is volunteer. So an invitation to come help out is
Right.
how a lot of people get involved with ballooning, even if you have no experience with balloons.
I mean, a lot of them are usually looking for volunteers, right? They're like
Hmm.
usually short, not usually, but sometimes they're short on volunteers. So
Hmm.
it's pretty easy to get involved, just like that. I was also thinking something that we haven't talked about is there's so many things at play here that make me think about like this childlike wonder. For example, fire,
Oh, sure.
them lighting the
Hmm.
balloon,
Hmm.
to inflate it. That alone is
The
such a
sound,
draw, and then you can be right next to it.
the
You can be right
heat.
next to it,
Yeah, you can
you
feel the
know.
heat on your face.
And like Sam said, if you haven't been, it does start very early. There's even dawn patrol, which means that there's a few balloons that go up to, get a look at the weather, basically. And
Before the sun comes
that's like
up.
4:30. So the sun doesn't
No,
come up
no.
till the sun comes up at, I think actually at 7, and the balloons start going up at 6. So my point is though, it's like it's completely dark, and then out of nowhere, there's like a bunch of these baskets that are igniting this like massive fire,
Hmm.
and it's just all these small things. I think that it's fascinating because he's talking about other air shows you can't get this close, but you can literally get right up to the basket and touch the basket and feel the fire on your face and look directly up into the balloon. And I think all of those things are or what make it so special?
When I was trying to describe the idea of feeling like you're in a Wizard of Oz movie, I kept accidentally saying it feels like you're in a cartoon. And I think we forget that, I think it's Looney Tunes takes place in New Mexico at some points. Like there
Mm,
was a Wile E. Coyote balloon. There's
mm,
like cute, kitschy cartoon characters from Looney Tunes around the city. And Santa Fe is mentioned. So when you're up in a balloon, it feels like Judy mentioned that moment where Wile E. Coyote runs off a cliff and you're just suspended
hmm
because it's a cartoon, but it's actually your life.
Just the whole concept of you're floating with the air, so you don't feel a breeze or movement or anything. It's sort of like Riley Coyote
Sure.
running off a cliff and you're up in the air. That's how I felt about it in the beginning. The first time I went up was just like, man, there's nothing underneath me.
It's really fun to just skim the tops of trees and pick the buds off the top of a tree because you feel like you could. It's kind of like you feel like you could step out and walk on the trees. Of course, you don't do it, but it's what it feels like, and that's part of the excitement, part of the freedom. That and because you can't control you have a certain amount of control when you're flying because you have gotten a weather briefing and you've studied what the winds are doing and you have the existing winds and then the forecast winds and you put those two things together and kind of make a makeshift flight plan, so you know where you're starting and you have a general idea where you're going to end up, but you can't just point a balloon and go there. You have to really work at it pretty hard. And so for me, part of the joy, the romance of ballooning, if you will, is just that. I've taken this time off to share this space with whatever being you might consider, higher being. Um, and I'm gonna make the most of it. I don't have to be a part of that crowd down there right at this moment. I'm free and I'm flying. I'm having a great time. So
What inspires me about what Wally says is that it reminds me that ballooning or flying is kind of the perfect practice in mindfulness. You have no
mm,
choice but to be fully present.
hmm
Unlike an airplane, hot air balloons are considered aircrafts, but unlike an airplane or a helicopter or whatever, you don't really steer. You
hmm
are at the whim of the wind for that day.
hmm
That's also why Albuquerque is so special. The Balloon Fiesta Park is strategically placed in the city because of the wind pattern. We have the high Sandia Mountains and then we have the low valley of the river. So the wind goes in different directions, creating a box. So based on your altitude, you can go in different directions. You have to just be paying attention. You get a briefing, but then once you get up there, you make decisions in the moment.
Do you think ballooning or piloting or flying is an addiction of sorts?
I think that anything that we love, it at least becomes a habit. I don't know that it's an addiction, but yeah, maybe. I don't. Well, it's kind of funny, right? Because it's a double meaning. Are you going to go get high this weekend? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I am. So flying, I think, is a different dimension. It's not available to everybody, but ballooning is available to most people. And in that sense, it can be an addiction and it can fulfill. I started off telling you about a dream that I had when I was a kid. It fulfilled my dream and it did it really, really well. And I told you that my first flight for Balloon Fiesta was in 1974. This is 2024, so it's my 50th year this year of being with Balloon Fiesta. So you could say I might be addicted.
It's also the second time that he talks about like the crowd down there. Like I don't have to be part of the crowd down there. I just identify with Wally. He's like his answer is so philosophical in nature. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I appreciate him wearing his heart on his sleeve for this interview because it's special.
I also love that you're inspired by his childlike wonder. He's so fired up to talk about Balloon Fiesta. Judy even sent me a message after, like, talking with you guys about Balloon Fiesta fired me up even more. I think it's been quite some time since she has piloted a balloon. So reminiscing on those kind of brought that spark back. Even Steve Stucker talks about strangers, no matter how far you've come from, seeing that look on their faces.
And the thing that I guess I love the most is no matter how sophisticated or how well traveled someone is, I see them come to Balloon Fiesta and they see the balloons go up and they're transformed into little kids on Christmas morning. And I really get a kick out of that. And that's just all I've done is just point out how beautiful this event is. And I've been blessed to kind of catch a free ride along with it.
My mind is also on the joy of Christmas a lot right now because Christmas, like holiday season, is upon us. So the big trees are lighting up in Civic Center Park. We're going to set up our tree soon. That kind of wonder of the lights and the twinkles and the magic. That reminds me, if you haven't gotten a Christmas gift yet, y'all should start thinking about it because you don't want to hit the rush. I know I hate hitting a rush. I have your Christmas gift under the bed.
You have told me. I have not looked yet. I can't promise that I won't look.
So we have the perfect place for you guys to shop. I mentioned that we're partnering with Puzzled on this episode. If you want something handcrafted, very unique, and something that you can do with another person to connect and play, they are your go-to spot. Whether or not you live in Albuquerque, you can visit them in Old Town if you do, and you can shop online if you don't.
Yeah, if you're not a great gift giver like me, and you're really not sure what you want to gift your friends and family and significant other, and want something wholly unique, like Sam is saying, a reminder that Puzzled is definitely your solution. Hopefully, if you live in Albuquerque, you visit it. If you haven't, I would plan to spend 30 minutes there because you will get stuck there trying to solve the puzzles and the brain teasers and things that you've never seen before. The store's full of it. It's absolutely incredible place.
So Dan and Mel are the owners, and Dan's family is a woodworking family. So most things are made out of wood, and they're all handmade in the U.S. You can get 10% off with the code SMH Podcasts, and I'll also put it in the description. Let us know, slide into our DMs or send us an email what you get and how you like it, and maybe we'll also gift that to ourselves this Christmas.
Like collecting Pokemon cards or comics or records. I guess people collect stamps. This is definitely a store full of puzzles and brain teasers that you can absolutely get addicted to. Watch out. Speaking of healthy addictions, it's not just the balloons themselves that people get addicted to at the International Balloon Fiesta in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's the pins.
So we talked to David Klein. He says that his collection is 3,000, and you by far have him beat with pin collecting. How many pins do you have?
I do have more than 3,000.
Yeah.
Maybe on me. Stop counting at 100,000 pins, and it's probably somewhere close to 200,000.
That's incredible. Would you describe pin collecting as an addiction of sorts?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can justify it any way you want. Like, for me, it's a great brain exercise to see a pin and try and track it down in my brain at the collection. So hopefully that'll help the aging process kind of slow down. But yeah, it's absolutely an addiction.
How did you originally get into pin collecting?
1978, my family sponsored a balloon, and we did pins that year. And my dad gave me 5 pins to get rid of me for the day, and I came back in 2 minutes with 10 pins, and the trade was on.
Again, with the butterfly effect that we keep talking about, and this seemingly inconsequential moment, his dad was busy living life, right? And wanted to give his kids something to be distracted with, and phones weren't out yet, and iPads. And so he gave his son a couple pins from the Balloon Fiesta, and that started Tai Young's 200,000 pin collection. I wanted to do the math on like how old is this guy? When did pins start? How many pins is that per day? It's insane. 200,000 pins. You can actually look up Tai Young on the internet. He has a shed. He has like a casita in his backyard that is essentially a balloon pin museum of sorts. I mean, it's absolutely absurd
Mm-hmm.
in the best way possible. Those small moments, right? And maybe not even, they don't seem like great moments on the surface, but it turns into something like super powerful and profound. And then I think about all these relationships and all the love and all of the positive energy that he's exchanged with countless people over the years. Like think about the amount of people that are involved in trading
Mm-hmm.
and buying and purchasing and talking about 200,000 pins.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't have happened had his dad not given him a couple pins to keep busy with.
Mm-hmm. We talked to David Klein, who you all haven't met yet. He is our 88-year-old interviewee.
88 years young.
And even Steve Stucker, he doesn't have an official pin collection. He doesn't consider himself an official pin collector. But all three of them mention the idea of how much joy and connection they feel when they give someone a pin, or they help someone find a pin they've been looking for, or when they connect with a child who's looking for or wants to get into pin collecting. And that feels extremely closely tied to legacy and community to me.
Mm-hmm.
Without getting too morbid, we sort of were asking Ty, okay, you have this massive collection. What are you going to do with it when you die?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about what's going to happen to your pin collection when you inevitably leave this plane?
Well, my daughter is a pin collector. I don't think she's a 200,000 pin collector. So there's talks about museum and giving it to the Balloon Fiesta itself. It's all about where it can be utilized and not just mothballed. So hopefully, is that wood? I'll be around for a while and we don't have to worry about that right away.
So just that really unique way to connect not only with your community, but also with your daughter.
Mm-hmm. A good point. So this is the one that is happenstance. We're in a crowd. There's 40,000, 50,000 people at the Balloon Fiesta on, I think this is like Tuesday or Wednesday. There's that many people during the week. Incredible. And we see this older gentleman who's wearing shorts and high white socks with white tennis shoes, maybe some New Balances, and he's got a vest on,
Mm-hmm.
and there's pins everywhere.
Mm-hmm. We beelined for
So
him.
we followed him. I turned on my camera and started recording us following him, and kind of waited for a moment. He was talking to a bunch of people actually in the moment of trading pins with friends, and we had our moment. And so we just kind of went up to him and asked him about his pin collection.
You get stuck on it
Yeah.
and then you just can't stop. You know, it's like taking a piece of something that you like to eat and you can only eat one. I got 3,000 now.
Wow.
So it just goes on and on and on.
What's your earliest memory of Balloon Fiesta?
Well, I crewed with a team. I knew a fella that finally got a balloon, and then my family crewed with him. And it just went on. We then became part of the Fiesta. We were on the target teams, the scorers. That's these pins up here. That's some of the first pins that we were able to get.
Of the 3,000 pins that you have, do you have a favorite?
No,
No.
they're all favorites.
It's like picking a favorite child. You can't do it.
Can't do it. You can't do it. There's always another one out there that you're looking for, and it pops up. Just like I was talking to these people over here, I have some pins that they say they didn't know about, and they're the Kremlin team, and the balloon was flying in another city, and there was a different set of pins that go along with the balloon. So I just brought them some pins.
Amazing. Does Balloon Fiesta ever get old?
No,
Never.
never. I'm only 88. How much more? You know, I've been following it for 40 years anyway.
If you missed our last episode called The Loneliness Economy, we sort of debrief a recent book from Casley Killam, who's a social scientist, called The Art and Science of Connection, just really driving home the point of how critical relationships are in our longevity and our overall health.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a perfect example of both deep and meaningful connection, intergenerational relationships, and also the brain game of collection.
hmm I will say that, you know, David Klein's 88 and these other folks that we interviewed are, in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. They all seem younger than they are,
Mm.
you know? And I really do believe that this is the primary reason. This is the driving factor, the Balloon Fiesta. I
Mm.
really do believe that. Talking with David Klein, we didn't ask him. I wish we would have asked him, but those pins, he talked about it a little bit, but those pins, each individual pin serves as like a memory capsule.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of, I feel like, why I'm, addicted to photography, because every
Mm.
single time I look at a photo, I'm instantly transported into that moment in time. For the most part, some I forget. I'm sure they forget some of the pins,
Sure.
when and where they were when they got them. But
Mm.
that's a beautiful thing too, right? Like the pin is not just a collector's item; it's a memory. It's an experience. It's proof of life,
Mm-hmm.
and that's incredible.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're also starting to touch maybe about like the relationships that are associated with the pins and kind of the community of pin
Right.
collecting.
Right.
Tell me more about the pin collecting community.
It's pretty vibrant. Obviously, this is where everybody comes home for the week to roost for pin collectors. There's people from Europe that come here specifically for the pins. It without a doubt, we're the pin trading headquarters of the world right now, and hopefully always will be.
I didn't know that about pin collecting headquarters. Do you have like relationships that you've built maybe through the community or even a specific pin that you traded that has sort of changed the way that you think about collecting or the way that you kind of engage with the community?
Well, there's a couple Facebook groups of nothing but pin collectors, and it's really fun. I'm working on some projects that I may have the pin in my collection, but I'm working on a second board of specific to Semco, was an old balloon manufacturer in the 70s. And so there's always pins I'm looking for, even though I may have them. I'm looking for a second set to build a frame. And it's been really nice touching base with some of the old balloonists through the pin trading sites and getting not only the correct history of the old stuff, but once in a while finding some that they have tucked away in their drawers.
And that just drives home what you're talking about, right? Which is like he's built this community now, not even at the Balloon Fiesta, but outside of it online. There's Facebook groups. He's obviously wholly devoted to this, even after he stopped counting. And something that we didn't show, but he's also talking about how he's sort of is bastion the right word? Like a bastion of, or a champion for fair trade for kids who might
Mm-hmm.
be, getting ripped off. He said that doesn't happen often. I'm sure that it doesn't. I'm sure the community is really, really, it's a positive community, but sometimes that does happen. And so now he's also helping younger generations to make sure that they're getting fair trade for their pins.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it goes back to this idea of one interaction or one moment or one person.
Mm-hmm.
We heard from Wally about how getting into ballooning and becoming a pilot really helped him come out of his shell when he otherwise might have spent time inside alone, not making friendships because he's a little more introverted.
Mm-hmm.
Ty has this legacy that he's thinking about for the future, but he's also investing in the younger generation now, both with pin collecting, with gifting pins, with his daughter. And we're going to hear from Judy about how ballooning has shaped her.
What do you think, if anything, being a pilot and being a part of the ballooning community has done to kind of shape the person that you are today? I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways it made me a little bit more adventurous. I mean, we used to go down south to balloon festivals, and one of them was always near the cotton fields, and I would hang off the back of at that time we had a balloon with a metal basket, and I would hang by my knees off the basket because the point of the adventure was picking cotton and who would get the most picked. And so a lot of people would just pick it from the side of the balloon and fly real low and everything, and we would fly a little bit higher and hang down and pick it.
If you haven't been to the Balloon Fiesta, I'm sure that you've probably at least seen on the internet, on Instagram, on TikTok somewhere, a hot air balloon, right? Can you imagine a young woman hanging off a gondola upside down, picking cotton, like 3 or 4 feet off the ground,
Well,
maybe
she
5,
said
6, 7 feet off the
she
ground.
said that the gondolas in those days were metal,
Sure,
so it's probably a little bit easier.
sure. Still, though, upside down from your knees,
Yeah.
it goes back to this childlike wonder. She became more adventurous as a result of becoming a balloonist and becoming a pilot and integrating herself into that community, you know? That's
Mhm.
a story that she'll never forget. That's a story that I'll never forget.
When I think of the word adventure, which is how Judy describes it, that is absolutely at the top of the list. Is it type 2 fun? Sarah mentioned that in her episode with us. Can I learn to love myself? Like something about
Mhm.
trusting other people in an environment which is adventurous. You get a little bit of adrenaline. There's a safety component. You have to sort of have your head on right.
Mhm.
It reminds me, I mean, being based in Colorado, everybody climbs. So that kind of, we need to focus. We need to be really honed in on our safety.
Mhm.
And it's really fun. All of those things together, I think, also create a recipe for a deep connection.
Mhm.
Like you just simply become more connected to people when you go through adrenaline rushing things together.
This episode comes down to magic. Like this
Mhm.
this event is truly magical, and I mean that in every sense of the word. The way that Wally talks about walking on trees and how Steve Stucker talks about adults, no matter the age, looking up at balloons and he sees them returning to Christmas as a child,
Mhm.
right? Like there is something inherently, in my opinion, magical about the power of something that you see with your eyes being able to induce that kind of feeling inside your body.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so for me, like it this episode just seems like it's about a return to innocence. Like everyone wants to
Mm.
sort of escape and return to what it was like to be a child,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
Speaking of flying at the whim of the wind
And adrenaline.
and adrenaline, we got to fly in a balloon this balloon fiesta. And we have so much footage from that we're going to make a documentary out of it. Among so much of the other footage that we have that we haven't shown you. So we're really excited about that. That's going to be coming out here pretty soon. And if you haven't flown in a balloon, you'll get to sort of experience what that was like. And I would say it was pretty damn eventful.
Also, Elliot's a nervous flyer in general, so you can hopefully hear in the background of some stuff him being like, whoa, whoa. I've been to the Balloon Fiesta every year for over 25 years. And my main takeaway, which is unique to this particular year and experience, is that childlike wonder keeps you young. So, although we highly, highly, highly recommend going to the Balloon Fiesta, it happens every single year at the beginning of October. If you can't or don't want to, or for whatever reason, I don't know why you won't want to, find things that inspire childlike wonder or awe or magic or um, that feeling of innocence and being young and being a kid. Whatever it is, like go to a magic show in your city or go to the tree lighting this Christmas in your local town square. But finding those moments and intentionally seeking them out.
Yeah.
Inevitably, you're going to bump into people.
Find where people value you and where you feel loved and cared for
And seen.
and go all in on that community and don't look back.
We hope you guys like this episode. A little different than what we normally do, but it was so fun.
And we do really encourage you to watch it. There's some pretty cool footage, and we're really excited to show you the documentary. That'll be out soon.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Love you. We're ditching the surface level relationships, so join us in creating something more human.
We're so happy that you're here, and we always want to go deeper with you. So we created the Something More Society. It's the go-to place to level up your connection, community, and collaboration. We have monthly book clubs, exclusive chat channels, mini episodes and Q&As with Elliot and I, and so much more.
If you're enjoying the show and want to find other ways to support, you can hit follow or subscribe on your favorite listening or viewing platform. Leaving a 5-star review would go a long way, along with a thoughtful review. Thank you so much.
Love you guys.